Well, all week I've been hearing people talk about Easter, and some of them have been saying, well, maybe we should postpone Easter this year. Well, that got my attention. Now, I get it. Here's what we don't have this Easter. No creepy Easter bunny photos. No grocery store trips to get Cadbury eggs and Peeps. No lilies, well, a few lilies. No trumpets, no huge crowds, no pictures with your family at the Easter cross. No parking challenges. Well, I'm pretty sure you don't miss that. But here's what we do have. Jesus stopped breathing, and then he started breathing. Jesus is alive. In my lifetime, I can't think of a time where we've more needed Easter. And my prayer this morning is that you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever situation you find yourself in, will come to the same conclusion, that there has never been a time where you have needed Easter more. You know, one pastor said it this way: people have not gathered for the past 2,000 years to say, the stock market has risen. It has risen indeed. They've not gathered to say, the dollar has risen. It has risen indeed. Or the employment rate has risen. Or the value of your 401k has risen. Or American Airlines, or Zoom stock, or Amazon has risen. Today we celebrate the one hope that humans have held on to across every continent and culture for 2,000 years. 2,000 years of all kinds of difficulties, including disease and war and recessions and death itself. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. You know, Mary was the first one to get to the tomb that first Easter Sunday. She was going to mourn a dead Jesus, not to meet a risen Jesus. And when she got there, she was totally shocked. And she went back to tell Peter and John. And she was worried. She was worried that someone had taken Jesus. So Peter and John race to the tomb. And John gets there first, and he looks inside the tomb. And John tells us that he believes. And then Peter gets there, and he rushes in, and then they both head back to the other disciples. Were they excited? Jesus told them this would happen, and it had. But where were those disciples after seeing the empty tomb? Here's how John continues the story. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. These disciples, they were locked up inside, and they were afraid. I wish I could bring Peter and John here today and interview them and ask them, what's going on? You believe, but you're locked up in fear? They were not acting like they had any hope. They were not acting like they believed anything. But Jesus is so good. He had already seen Mary, and now he shows up to the disciples. He shows them his hands and his side, just so they can be sure. See, when Jesus shows up, people go from fear to faith. People go from panic to peace. People go from hopeless to hopeful. In an instant, everything changed for the disciples. Imagine for a minute that Jesus had never showed up ever again. He hadn't showed up alive that day. Well, Jesus would probably still be a very famous historical figure. He would have been considered a great prophet, an excellent and gifted teacher, and an inspirational example about how you should live. But everything changed when he showed up. He had been dead. He had stopped breathing. And now he was alive. And he was breathing. Those disciples, especially Peter and John, they may have believed before, but that day they had a life-changing encounter with Jesus. And Jesus was no more simply a teacher or a prophet or an example. Jesus was alive. He was the Son of God. And he was their risen Lord that they wanted to follow forever. You know, one church in England a few years back was getting ready for Easter, and they had signs all ready for the front of their church. And here's what the sign said. Oops. Chris is risen. You know, if you get this wrong, there's no Christianity. If you get this wrong, you have no hope. Yaroslav Pelikan, the church historian at Yale, he said it best when he said this. He said, if the resurrection of Jesus actually happened, then nothing else really matters. And if the resurrection of Jesus did not actually happen, then nothing else really matters. See, the resurrection changed everything for the disciples that day. And ever since, people have tried to figure out what happened. How did these disciples, who were so afraid that they were locked behind a closed door, turn into these men on a mission who shared Jesus with the world? It didn't make sense. And it still doesn't, except resurrection. George Weigel said it this way in the Wall Street Journal. How does one explain that curious and inexplicable joy that marked the early Christians, even as they were being marched off to execution? Was that joy simply delusion, denial? Perhaps it was the Easter effect. The joy of people who had become convinced that they were witnesses to something inexplicable but nonetheless true. Something that gave a superabundance of meaning to life and that erased the fear of death. Something that had to be shared. Something with which to change the world. But as powerful as that encounter was, as life-changing as it wasn't the last time that these first followers would hide behind a closed door. See, they went out into the world to tell the people the story of Jesus and invite them to follow. Literally all over the world. But they also faced incredible persecution. And every one of them, except John, would give their life for the sake of their faith in Jesus. But no matter what they experienced, no one could take away what happened that Easter. Peter himself captures that truth that we all need in his letter in the Bible. He wrote to some of the earliest followers who were putting their life at risk by following Jesus. Here's what he said. He said, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Peter was saying that even in the darkest moments, Peter had it. And the Christians he wrote to had it. And you have it. Because Jesus showed up, because he's alive, there is hope. There is hope no matter what else is happening in your life. You know, hope is a pretty loaded word. Here's what it's not. Hope is not wishing. Hope is not being optimistic. Hope is having certainty about the future. But hope is also more than just a word. We can't survive without it. When a team loses hope, the game is over. When investors lose hope, the stock market tumbles. When a patient loses hope, death is crouching at the door. Peter, of all people, understood this roller coaster of no hope to hope. Just 3 days before, Peter had deserted Jesus. He had denied Jesus. He had watched Jesus go to the cross. And he knew that Jesus was dead. But now he sees the risen Jesus. And when he sees Jesus, he doesn't just have optimism. He doesn't just wish. He has hope. He is certain that his future has changed. Peter has living hope because of the resurrection of Jesus. You know, today, Jesus wants to move you from belief to a life-changing encounter with the risen Lord. He wants you to experience Easter hope. You know, I think it's safe to say that this is one of the strangest Easters ever. There's so much bad news. Every time I open up my browser, every time I turn on my TV, I'm bombarded with these images of masks and PPE and testing and hospitals. I'm blown away by statistics. The rate of cases and deaths keeps going up, and the Dow Jones keeps going down. And we know that this is just the beginning, really. The isolation we're experiencing and the unemployment numbers that keep growing, we know there will be long-term effects. So this morning, where's the hope? Well, it's all around. There's hope in science. You know, it seems like every day there's progress. We actually know what COVID-19 is, and we have ways to treat symptoms. We have respirators to help people breathe. The tests are getting quicker and more accurate. Scientists are busy working for a cure. Clinical trials have already started. There's hope in science. There's also hope in people. In the midst of darkness, there are always people who shine. In the midst of the mess, it's so easy to see that God made us. God made people in his image. People are making us laugh. A few days ago, I drove past Moravian College, and that great bronze statue of John Amos Comenius, it had its own mask. Like you, I've heard some clever parodies, like the Beatles parody, "I gotta wash my hands." You heard that. And there's some unlimited TikTok entertainment. People are also showing kindness. Many of you through our church quickly jumped in to meet the needs of our homeless population. You bought tents and sleeping bags and backpacks and other supplies. As a church, we got to provide internet hotspots for our partner school, Freemansburg families. through your mission giving. One of our members, Erica Batinger, is bringing a grassroots movement that is spreading all over the country, right here to the Lehigh Valley. It's called Flag of the Lehigh Valley, and it's been launched to give support to people who are on the front lines. I'm amazed people are doing the most creative things to serve and to help. People are showing courage. Every day we see images of healthcare folks here and literally around the world who are running towards the virus rather than running away from it. You know, families are spending more time together than ever. And I'm trying to see the joy and the hope in that. Every day I'm trying to post a hashtag brought to you by Corona because there are things that we're all getting to do because of this horrible situation we find ourselves in. And there's some good things happening. This may or not have been, may or may not have been good. I actually cut my son's hair. Here's a picture of it. There is a lot of hope out there. There's hope in science. There's hope in people. But all of that hope is just a reflection of the only hope that you can bet your life on. Easter hope is the hope that stands in a category all on its own. See, because Jesus showed up, because he came back to life, because of Easter, you can have this living hope that Peter talked about. Jesus gave his life. He died on the cross for you, and he came back to life. And he did all of that for you because he knew what you needed. A few weeks ago, just after most Americans were beginning to stay at home, there was this cardiologist who was pulled over for speeding in Minnesota. Dr. Janquin had a Massachusetts license, and the officer wanted to know why she was so far from her home. And she began to explain that she travels to the state once a month to be a fill-in cardiologist. Well, the officer gave the doctor a lecture about her safety and how irresponsible it was that she was speeding, especially now since doctors are so desperately needed and she could have gotten into an accident. And then the officer went back to his car and the doctor waited for her ticket. But when he returned, he didn't give the doctor a ticket. Instead, he handed her 5 N95 masks. Masks that were given to him for his own safety. Jesus came into the world to give you and me what we needed. See, God could have given up on all of us. He could have been indifferent. He could have been angry. But he loved us all the way to the cross. He died so that we wouldn't have to. And then he came back to give us the proof. Our hope is a living Lord. Our living hope is not a what, it's not a why, it's not based on how you feel or what you're going through. Because there is a living Jesus, there is a living hope. Our living hope is a who. Jesus alone can give you this hope. And if you'll put your life in his hands, you can have this hope. If you make him the leader of your life, you will face whatever comes with him right beside you. And this living hope will never change. You know, some doctors are saying that today will be the peak of COVID-19 deaths. It just seems impossible that that's happening on Easter Sunday. But still, we hang on to our living hope. There will be dark days long after we've put away our COVID masks. You will have your own dark days. But whatever has you afraid, whatever has you tired or embarrassed or shamed, whatever is keeping you from being who God made you to be, whatever has convinced you that you don't have purpose or you aren't worth anything, well, the living Jesus wants to come into your life and give you a living hope. His resurrection that we celebrate today is proof that he is stronger than any setback and any failure and any loss or disappointment, any closed door that you would ever hide behind. I've never been more glad to celebrate Easter, because Easter means hope. God, would you show yourself to us this morning? Would you show us beyond a shadow of a doubt that resurrection means everything for us? Would you help us to move from belief to a life-changing, hope-giving encounter with you? Because that's what Easter is. That empty tomb gives us living hope for our todays and for our forevers. God, I pray for every person listening, whatever they are experiencing, may they know the living Jesus who is in their living room today and who is ready to offer them Easter hope. Amen.